Hello everyone and welcome back to this video tutorial series of Top 11. In this part we're going to talk about how to set your lineup and your orders and all the information you can find about the roster and your players. So the screen I'm on now is the squad screen. So to get there you would push this button here. I'm already here, so this button doesn't do anything, but if I was on another screen, I would push that button to get us to the screen you see here. On this screen is a lot of very important information. Right here is your quality. This goes anywhere from 1 star to 9 stars. Now, an important thing to note is that the stars are all relative to your level, myself being level 9. 70 is the minimum I would have for a 7-star player. He would be 6 stars to a level 10 player. He would be 5 stars to a level 11 player. So the stars are all relative. So for me, 70 to 74 would be 7 stars, 60 to 64 would be 5 stars. So you can see my 5-star players are all between 60 and 64. So you can get a pretty good idea of how strong your team is by the stars, but the stars don't always tell the whole story, which we'll get into in just a bit. This line here is special abilities. These are quite useful, unless they're not. Here's a defensive wall, an aerial defender, a penalty specialist. There's all sorts of different ones. We'll talk about those in depth in another part, but for now, you can just assume that you want them. This line here is status, injuries, and cards. So since he has a yellow in the league, it says 1 more and he'll be suspended. If he had a red, it would say how many matches off he has. He also yellow. If he had a yellow in a different form of competition, it would say that there as well. Someone who is injured, it would have a little cross right here. Fortunately, I don't have any players who are currently injured. If I did, that's where you would see that. This is their nationality. If you want players from a certain country, you can certainly try to do that. This screen is nice because you can see all the different roles. Some players play one, and some players can play multiple positions, like this guy here can play anywhere on the defense, so that's very valuable. I can put him anywhere on this line. This is your defense, of course, your defensive backs, your midfield, attacking midfield, your strikers, and your keeper, of course, goes back there. Now, to make a switch, there's 2 ways you can do it. The first way, which I prefer, is just to simply pick up the player you want, drag him to where you'd like him to play on top of another player, and then release. And that will now make a substitution. If I want to save it, I do that. And there, he is now in the lineup for my next game. Now, Salvalainen has been playing really well lately, so I'm going to stick with him for now. But the other way I can substitute, make the same substitution, is do it right there. I don't like that as much because you don't actually see on the screen where they're going. Now, number 12 lit up, but for me that's just not as convenient to do it this way. It's much easier to just actually put them on the screen, but that's just my opinion. You can do it however you want. If I wanted to, say, add a 5th defender, I can't just do that because that would give me 12 on the field. I have to drop him on the guy I'm substituting and then actually move him down, and always try to keep your lineups balanced. Now, you may have noticed when I put number 18 Bueno at striker, him being a defender, it gave me a red box. Now, what those boxes mean is a player is playing out of position. So, as you can see here, if I move him around a little bit, you'll notice that a light green box, that means it's his natural position. He wants to play there, so I need to put him in one of those 4 boxes. A yellow box will give me a yellow warning. That means he's out of position, but he can play there if he has to. Now, he won't play as well, so you want to try not to do this unless you have to. If I put him, say, up here in a dark box, I get a red box. And this red box means he is completely out of position, and you'll get a substantial drop in performance. So you definitely don't ever want to do that. So we want to put him back there, but again, I don't really want to make that substitution, so I just go back to my original lineup and the save button disappeared. So if the save button disappears, that means you had the same lineup. So this pull down menu here gives us access to other useful information. If we go to the selection view, we can view their condition and their morale. These are obviously very important. You see he's 93%. That will recover naturally throughout the day. We'll discuss how much and how to plan around that when we talk about training. Morale goes up and down based on their performances and how much you're playing them. You don't get an exact percentage, but as long as it's darkish green, that's okay. You don't really want that. You probably want to fix that before the next game. You really don't want that. You definitely want to be fixing that. We'll talk about how to do that when we talk about packs. You can recover any of those bars instantly by using packs. In the stats, this is a lot of useful information. This form is probably the most important one. If a guy is getting a lot of 8s, he's a really good player. If he's getting 9s, he's a superstar. So if you have any players that are consistently getting 8s and 9s, then they're really, really good. So you definitely want to keep those. If they're consistently getting 6s, that's probably not a very good player. If they're getting less than 6s, then they're not doing very well at all. So you probably want to replace those. So watching this number is really important. And then your basic stats like goals and assists, number of times he's been man of the match, their cards, and how many times they've played. These are skills. I don't really have a lot to say about that. It just kind of says their individual skills. Contract details. The most interesting number on this is definitely player value. The more expensive they are, that means they have more potential. So this guy, he's by far my most expensive player. It doesn't mean he's my best player. It just means he has the potential to be the highest rated player between his age, his current abilities, and his trading speeds. This guy is actually my best player. He scores lots and lots and lots of goals, but he's 22, so his value is not quite as high as, say, a guy who's 18. So that's kind of what you can read into that. So high-priced players, not necessarily the best. They just have the most potential. That's important to remember. First, transfers, unless you have somebody on auction, you're not going to really see anything there. So that doesn't really mean much. We'll go back to general info. I'll click on this guy and you can show you can get some more information. Here's all his ratings. I have him unbalanced for attack. We'll discuss why I did that when we go into training, but logically you can probably figure out why based on his position. And there's his ability if he has one. If he doesn't, it'll say he doesn't have one. Stuff like height, weight, preferred foot. His health shows his injury, none, which is good, of course. His morale, his condition. Here's his contract. Same information we saw on the other screen. It was just made for this specific player. Now this is really good because you can see his last 5 in each type of match. This can be pretty significant. So as you can see, he's got lots of 8s, some 9s. So that means he's really awesome. But you could have told just by the number of goals he's gotten that he's a pretty darn good player. So as for offers, I'm not selling him, so I have no offers for him. So that means nothing. You can adjust what you view here, but that's really nothing you wouldn't see over here. If you want to save a formation, You just simply click on that. You can save a formation. I don't do that. I just move them around as I want to, but that's available if you just want to save specific lineups. Now we're going to move on to these buttons. These buttons are really important. We're going to spend quite a bit of time discussing on what's in here. This button here gets you to this screen where you see the field, where you can actually move the guys around. Here's your orders. This is really important. You gotta know what you're doing here or you're gonna have a lot of trouble. Team mentality, you have 5 choices: hard defending, defensive, normal attacking, and hard attacking. I usually start in defensive, normal, or attacking, depending on my opponent. I like attacking if I think I'm better than my opponent. Or sometimes I'll choose normal. It really just depends on how my team is playing. Hard defending, I don't really like at all. It seems like things always go very badly when I choose that one. Hard attacking, I'll choose in-game if I get behind and I need goals quickly. Especially if I get down 2 goals early, I'll definitely go into hard attacking. So that's a choice that would be made in-game, but I would never start that way. Focus passing, it's pretty self-explanatory. If you think your opponent is weak on the outside, you want to go down the flanks. If you think that he's weak in the middle, you want to go through the middle. And it also depends a lot on your players. My AML and AMR are pretty good, so I like to use the flanks a lot of the time. Right now I just have mix, which basically means don't skew the passes, just kind of mix it around. If you're pretty balanced, then that's not a bad strategy. Myself running a 4-4-2, that makes a lot of sense. It's a very balanced lineup. Pressing style, again, I usually start as own half. If you do whole pitch, it's riskier. But if you're behind in the match, that's not a bad idea. Or if you think putting pressure on the other team will work very well, that's something to do. Tackling style, this is one that is very different based on your opponent. Now, some people will say don't use hard tackling. It really depends on your players. You're not going to be able to judge this until you actually play your players. But if you have players that get a lot of cards, you don't want to use hard tackling. If you have an opponent with a good free kick specialist, you don't want to use hard tackling. Now, with my team, I don't get a lot of cards. And I have a good counter to free kicks, which are these 2 guys, because they're wall specialists. So, unless I'm playing a guy with a really strong free kick, I'll use hard tackling. But if you're getting a lot of cards, then you don't want to do that. You just want to use normal. So, hard is good if you can do it. I find that I do a lot of great things on defense, but it's not for everybody. Passing style, it just depends. Short will give you more possession, but you're not going to generate as many big opportunities. I usually choose mix just because it's a good balance. Marking style, you almost always want to use zonal, unless you're clearly better than your opponent, which isn't going to happen too often, so you'll almost always use that. This button here, if your opponent has an AMC, you check that box. If he doesn't, you just this box is for AMCs. If your opponent has an AMC, you check this box here. If he does not have an AMC, you just uncheck it. If you think you can score with counterattacks, if say your midfield is a lot stronger than his, check this box. If you don't think your midfield is stronger than his, then don't check this box. If you're not sure, just probably leave it unchecked, since it's a more risky formation. If you just play the game without this, then you're not going to go for a lot of counterattacks. Here is your automatic subs. So if you're not watching your match, this is who would go in subs. You just do it the same way like you would in a lineup. You just simply drag and drop. Not too difficult. You don't have to fill them all in. But the advantage here is if you have an injury, it'll substitute for who you want. If you don't, the game will just guess, which may be bad for you. So fill in as many as you can. For penalty takers, you just put them in the order that you want them. So if he's on the field, he'll take my penalties. If he is not on the field, we'll just go down the line. If we get into a shootout, we'll take the top 5. I have a hole here because I sold somebody, but I can, again, use drag and drop, and it will fill them in. That's definitely my best 5. So if I was in a shootout, these 5 guys here would take my kicks. Now, if you're in a match and you forget to do that, it goes to penalties. It will ask you before to pick your 5. So it's not the end of the world, but you definitely want to set that. Free kick takers work the exact same way, left and right. I don't really differentiate between sides. But this guy, he takes all my free kicks because he's my star and he's a free kick specialist, so that just logically makes sense. Corners, it works again the same way. I'm using him to take all my corners right now. I could change that if I wanted to. If you have a corner specialist like him, you definitely want him to float to the top. He's not playing in my starting lineup right now, so he's not at the top. But if I was, then he would definitely be taking my corners. I have this guy up here because he is playing, and he's playing at a very high level right now, so I figured I would give him a chance. And the final button is the captain's button. There's some debate on if this actually does anything. I don't know. I just picked him because he's been on my team for 6 seasons. He's been a great player for me, and he always seems to perform well. I almost never get any score below 7 on his form. He averages about 7.3. In past seasons, he averages about 7.5, so he's been a really strong player. So I would guess that's what you'd want from your captain, a guy who's been consistent, who's been there a while, but who's to say if it actually does anything. But the same works. You just drag and drop. If I wanted to switch, you can do something like that, and they'll switch places. And again, I went back to what it was, so the save button disappeared. And, well, if a friend's match happens, it'll pop up. So we're not going to do that, but if you see that, that's what that means. So yeah, that about does it for how to set a lineup and set a formation. And in the next part, we'll be discussing some more exciting and interesting topics. And thank you very much for watching. I hope this will help you with your game, and I hope that you will tune in for the next part. Until next time.